Welcome back to my tutorial series. Today we're on part 2, and if you haven't seen part 1 yet, that's going to be very important for you. We go over the basics of how to use FireAlpaca to animate, so you're going to want to watch that. I'll put a link in the description below. Now, today we're going to be working on timing, weight, and arcs. It's important to know how to make your objects look as though they're really being affected by gravity, and a lot of that is in knowing the timing. Because a bowling ball is going to fall a lot differently than a bouncy ball or baseball. And in the same way, a heavy character is going to move in a lot different way than a light character. This will get you to really understand these core principles so that you know what you want these motions to look like. Okay, so one thing I didn't go over in the last tutorial, I figured this would be fairly obvious for you to do, is how to create a new FireAlpaca document. And all you have to do is go to File, New, or hit Control-N. And then you'll get this box here. And if you're animating YouTube videos or something like that, you're going to want to do it in 16:9. That's your widescreen aspect ratio. So I just do 1600 by 900 because that's easy to remember. You can also do, of course, 1920 by 1080. It really doesn't matter. If you're not really going to be saving this in HD, then it's better to keep the resolution down. Anyway, so I have this set at 1600 by 900 pixels. There we go. Alright, so I have my document open. And what we're going to be doing today is we're going to have the ball bounce, come in from the side, and bounce across. And we'll get a feel for how to make things look heavy or light. So right now we have our blank document, and the first thing we want to do before we do any actual animation is to draw an arc. When a ball bounces, it doesn't just bounce, like this. It goes and bounces more like this. Now, a curved arc on every bounce. And when you're animating, you want to keep things on arcs. And if you have ever done any calculus or anything, you'll know that a lot of what you're studying is parabolas and arced motion and how to plot that. That's because almost every single thing in nature operates on an arc. Now, in FireAlpaca drawing with a mouse, you can see these are very wonky, wobbly lines. So we're going to delete those, and again, with our folder open, put a new layer in. This is going to be our diagram layer. So make sure you go up here and hit the grid button and draw out your ground plane, because you want those bounces to always be hitting the same ground plane. If you don't have that drawn, and you're going around drawing your ground plane, and then you're going like this, and then on the second bounce it goes like that, and on the third bounce it's up here, people are going to be like, that doesn't make any sense at all. And of course, try to remember that the center of our ball is where we're plotting this line. So if I touch it down all the way here, then that means that the center of the ball is going to be here. So it's going to look like that. And it's going to be going through the ground. So when you're plotting your line, make sure you're thinking about, oh, the center of my ball is about here. So having the center of the line being a little bit over your ground plane is going to keep your ball from hitting the ground. So that line, again, looks pretty wonky. How do we get it to look nice and curved? So in FireAlpaca, we have this nice little correction tool. The computer takes what line you're drawing and corrects it to make it a little bit more curved, so it looks more smooth and not as jagged. It's very helpful. It's not 100% perfect. You may have to go over these lines a couple times if you're using a mouse. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I like to have my brush nice and thin, and I like to have my arc, my actual diagram, to be a different color than my ground plane. That way it's less confusing when I actually go to animate. And even when we go to animate, we're going to turn down the opacity on this a little bit so we can see what we're doing. When we plan out our bounces, we want the first bounce to be rather high, but the second bounce shouldn't go all the way back up to the top. You always lose a little bit of energy on each bounce. So we're going to put the middle of it here. So this is going to be where it touches the ground. And it's easier, you get a better quality line if you draw your one arc, then lift up on the mouse. Because if you go like this, and you're like, oh darn, that doesn't look very good, and you have to Control Z, and then you do that all over again, and you're like, okay, well the first bounce looks good, let's go to the second one. Okay, that one looks okay. And then we go to the last one, and like, ah, crap, it looks terrible. I have to go back and Control Z that whole thing. Since I've just drawn this arc by itself, if I have to undo it, I only have to do the one. And then I can just Control Y, bring it back. And then if I fudge up this, like, oh, that doesn't look very good, Control Z. And I still have this reasonably nice looking one. Okay, so you stop drawing, and you tick on your line where the center of the ball is, and draw your other arc starting from there. So I'm going to have it come up about a little bit less than half the way. As you can see, I didn't make that arc look super nice. This would be better. So I'm just going to go ahead. I think that looks perfect. And again, you're going to be hitting the ground about here. And then, since I had this come up to about a little bit less than half, I'm going to have this bounce come up to a bit less than a third of this. It's coming up to a little bit less than a third of that. It's losing even more energy than the last bounce lost. And it's not going to be able to go quite as far this time because it's not going to be having as much time spent in the air. Then it hits the middle here. And then it's going to do a little bounce and come up and back. And then you're going to draw that again. And then maybe it will do one more tiny bounce. Very slight. Maybe it's going to be in the air for one frame before it comes back down. And then it's just going to roll all the way to the end. So I'm going to just make sure my tick looks a little bit more clear. And it's going to roll. It's going to roll for a while. You want it to ease in really slow to this roll. And so then it's going to end up here. So this is where all our keyframes are. We're going to have a keyframe up here. Whenever you have something entering the frame, you want it to be part way out of the frame. So you kind of want to have this first frame where it's just peeking in. So technically the tick mark would be around here somewhere. As it's coming in, it's already fully accelerated. So you don't have to worry about easing it into this action. You want to be able to ease it out at the end, but it's already at full speed here, and it's going to be slowing down all the way through. So when you're marking your tick marks, be wary of that. So it's going to be slowing down horizontally. You don't want it to be sporadically speeding up horizontally, because when it bounces, it's not gaining any speed. It's only losing energy as it goes across. So you don't want it to slow down into this bounce and speed up out of the bounce. So it's a little bit off screen here. You put another tick mark at about whatever speed you think it's going to be moving at. So if there's one over here, then you might want to put one here. And these ones are all going to be pretty close in speed. Now the problem is since you don't want to be slowing down horizontally, it's moving from here to here, then here to here, then here to here. That's already looking kind of slow. If it's coming in this fast, then it should be hitting the ground right around this fifth frame here, and then coming up here, and then going like this. So it's not going too slow. You still want to have your squash and stretch frames. So the stretch frame is always right before the contact frame. So it would look like that. And then your squash frame would be here when it makes contact. And then like before, it's going to snap back into its original shape to give it that springy texture. So it's moving pretty fast across the screen. And so here's your stretch, there's your squash, there's your bounce. Again, we always have the ability to tweak this. If it doesn't look perfect when we play it back, we can always transform and move things around and make sure everything's looking great. Okay, so that's what we got there. And when you are doing a bounce like this, you want it to be coming up for as many frames as it's going down. You want this to be more or less symmetrical. If it spends 3 frames in here and it spends 6 frames over here, then it's going to be coming down at half the speed that it went up at. It's going to be going more or less the same speed coming down. So you're going to have 2 coming up, 2 coming down, and then contact. So this one is there's going to be a stretch, but it's not going to be quite as much of a stretch. Maybe like that. Again, these are very off-model drawings I'm drawing with my mouse. We're going to go back. These are just guides. You don't even have to draw these for yourself, but they may be helpful to you. And then when it squashes, again, it's going to be a less pronounced squash. And then you're going to have it come up. And you don't want it to be quite in the air for quite as long as this was. So I'm going to put it in the air for 3 frames. This was in the air for 1, 2, 3, 4 frames. This will be in the air for 1, 2, 3 frames. And then this will be in the air for 1, 2 frames. And then this will be in the air for 1 frame. You don't have to slow it down like that. You can slow it down faster if you want. You could have it go from 4 to 3 to 1. Or you can have this would be at the top of its arc. There would have been this one from 7 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. You have to go from 7 to 3 to 1. And that's all going to affect how heavy your ball appears to be. Let's go back and look and see how we were slowing down from side to side. We seem to be slowing down very good. We want to continue this rate of slowing all the way to the end, because people have a tendency to stop their ball bounce right here at the end, or even stop it here. Let's look how we left off. We have a segment that long, but you want to make sure that you're at least that far away next time, maybe a little bit shorter. And then you can decrease that by a little bit. And then, so now you have a segment like this big. So that segment, you maybe want to cut that segment in half and draw there, and then there. And then you might even want to have 3 frames right at the end, because it eases in really slow. And when you get to animate this and you play it back, we may play it back and see, oh, maybe we want a couple more frames. We're just nudge a pixel. A pixel can make all the difference sometimes. And those are the easiest frames to draw. They can really make or break your animation. So do not get lazy. Just draw those last few frames. Okay, so now we got to figure out about how big we want our ball to be and spawn it in. So again, we go to our little square tool here. Make sure we're selected onto the ellipse. Make sure it says select from center and constrain proportions. And I'm going to make a black circle because why not? And I like the shape of this circle here. You can make your circle as big or as small as you want, but that's going to affect your outline you drew. So you have a good idea of what you want your ball to look like before you draw your outline. Since I was expecting to have a ball about this big, I think that will look fine for me. Let's find the center of that ball. It's not quite in the center where I drew that drawing. Okay, so there's our black ball. You can make your ball whatever color you want. Let's be a little bit more fun today. I'm going to make I'm going to use a little FireAlpaca. FireAlpaca has a brush that's the little alpaca. So you go down to where in your brushes, select FireAlpaca, and you can use the brush tool to spawn in a cute little alpaca. Boop. And so that's going to be our ball. We're not going to fiddle around with any rotation. You can try that out for yourself if you like. It'll make your animation look a lot more realistic, but we want to just focus on the quality of motion. This is going to be our first frame. And then we want to have our last frame. And we're not doing a loop today, so we don't have to worry about deleting the last frame. When you rename your folders, double click your folder, and then this will pop up in your name, and then you just type in your name, and boom, it will show up. And we want to have we always want to have a spare one of these, or a spare little alpaca ball, because if we do something to it or we need to delete a frame, we want to make sure we still have the unadulterated alpaca, especially when we squash and stretch it, because we want it to get back to look exactly like this. So now we want to, this is going to be our spare, and I'm going to just tuck this at the end, and then we can delete that later. The next thing we want to do is we're going to want to put in our key poses. So our key poses are, again, they're going to be our top, the end, and the squash and stretch and spring. So let's go to our first frame. Our first frame is going to be, we're going to take our alpaca, and we're going to make sure we're selected on the alpaca layer. You can double click again on the layer and name your layer alpaca, and you can do that for every other thing. It's better to do that before you duplicate. That way you don't have to go through like I'm doing now. Okay, so here's our first. We're going to have stretch 1, squash 1, or contact 1 is better. Contact 1, because your contact pose is when your character touches the ground or object or whatever. So contact, and then duplicate this again. We're not transforming anything. We're duplicating and naming our frames. So this is going to be spring. Spring is when it springs back up off the ground. Spring 1. And it's easier to do this with your folders closed. That way it's not taking up so much space over here. If you have 2 displays, you can take this little window out and stretch it out, and it helps you see more of what you're doing at once. But since I am doing this in tutorial mode, I'm going to keep this on here so you see what I'm doing. Alright, so I'm just going to quickly go ahead and finish naming my folders. Okay, so I've finished setting up all my folders for my key poses. So now let's go put our key poses in. And we're going to start with our first frame. Take our alpaca. And make sure we go to View, Onion Skin Mode. So all we're seeing is the frame we're working on now. So, boop, that green alpaca there. That's the alpaca from next frame. So we're going to put our first alpaca up here, so he's just coming into the frame. And then we're going to go to our first stretch. So here's about where we said we wanted our first stretch to be. Now how do we stretch him? We can't stretch him in the direction that he's falling. He's falling this way, so he needs to be stretched diagonally, but we can't do that. When we push Control T to transform, if you hover your cursor outside of that box, you'll get this little symbol here that looks like a little bit of a circle that's almost closed with the arrows. And then you can hold that down and point it that way. And now, if you select the vertical transform, you can stretch it that way and then that way. And that way it's going in the direction that you want it to go. You can give it a pretty severe stretch because it's coming in hot. I'm going to put it down a little bit lower than what I have it here because I want it to really look like it's bolting down here. And so then when you're done transforming, press enter. Then you go to your contact pose. You want to have your alpaca, and so he's going to be pretty much straight up and down this time, so you don't have to worry about stretching him the right way. Just move him down here and Control T, and again you stretch him down and you stretch him wide because you don't want him to lose any of that mass. Again, it doesn't have to be 100% perfect. The audience will forgive tiny, tiny alterations. If you're dealing with a highly detailed animation with a lot of different details that need to be tracked, you do need to be more exact. But if you're doing like cartoons just for your own fun or for even a low-budget short film, you do not have to obsess over keeping your characters completely on model. If you go watch The Simpsons, if you go watch Gravity Falls, you'll see that there are slight losses of detail as the animations are drawn over and over and over again. Let's come in here, he bounces here, then he springs back up here in the original shape. And so that's going to be our spring 1 pose, but he's back to his original shape here. I guess if I looking at this spring, based on the size of this alpaca here, he seems to be taking up a little bit more space than he should be. So I'm going to go squash my other alpaca and make sure that he's looking fine. Just squash him a little bit more. I don't want him to look too big. And make sure that the bottom of the ball is touching the floor. And that looks a little bit better. And you can close your folders as you're done working on them. And you can page through that again with the comma key to see how that looks. Boop. That was good. Maybe you want to move my alpaca over to the right a little more or move this alpaca that's coming down a little bit to the left, because it looks like he's barely moved from left to right, because you want him to be moving left to right at a consistent speed. So I'm going to move my alpaca that's coming down here. I'm just going to press V and use just the straight move tool and move him off to the side a little bit so that he's not doing that. We're more or less keeping to our guide, but again, it's important for you to be able to eyeball it and be keying through and know when to make a change. See, that looks a lot better. Okay, so now it's coming up here. And we're not going to worry about these frames for now, because we're only dealing with our key frames. So we're going to the next stretch pose. And we have our alpaca here. He's going to be around here. And I'm going to Control T. I'm going to tilt him again so that he's facing the right way. And he's not going to be going quite as fast as last time. So he's going to be stretching, but only ever so slightly. Only ever so slight of a stretch. How am I looking? Needs to be stretched this way a little bit more. Slight stretch. There you go. And again, on the contact, when he's coming down and squishing again, a slight squish, nothing spectacular. Just make him look a little bit more round than usual. There you go. And then our next key pose is this spring frame right here. So select that, use your V move tool to move him over here, and that should be fine. And then, so our next is going to be stretch 3, again, even more slight than last time. I don't like that. He should be here. And then I'm going to Control T, slight bend, maybe a pixel or 2. And that should be fine. And then, so that's that stretch. And then this contact. He's going to bounce. He's going to squash again very slightly. And again, he's slowing down from side to side. Our next spring is not going to be quite as far away this time. There's this. There's that. Again, let's key through this and see how it's looking. Bonk, 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 bonk. He may only bounce once here, if I'm being honest. I don't know. You have to play it back and see how it looks, but if I'm correct, he's not going to really stay in the air all that long. Tell you what we'll do. We'll just move this over a little bit. So I got my stretch 4, and it's supposed to be here. I'm just going to move him over here a little bit. And I'm going to move him slightly down. And again, 1 pixel's worth of stretch here on each side, remember. And then he's going to come down. Let me move him down a little bit more. So he's right about here. That was a bit wider than we had it last time. And then the last contact. And I need more keyframes. I didn't have enough originally. But this is where he comes down here. He's going to go bounce up and once more, but I didn't bother to put a keyframe for that because he's not really, because he's going to squash a little bit here. But then when he bounces up, he's just going to be normal size, and when he comes back down, there's going to be no bounce to it. This is going to be this last bounce is going to be very slight. So if the top of this was right here, the top of this is going to like barely go over his head, and we'll just stop it there, and then we'll start rolling. All right, so we're on the last frame. So let's duplicate this. This isn't going to be our last. This is going to be frame. I don't know what number frame it's going to be because we have all these other keys in. So this is going to be spring 5 or spring 4. Spring 4. And we're going to move them. Oh. Remember to select your alpaca layer, not the entire folder. So looking at here, he's going to be up slightly. Like just barely. He's still going to move a good distance, but he's not going to bounce up that much. So he's going to go, so our center was here, so he's probably going to be the air over here. Let's move our diagram over since we moved everything else over, so that the center of him is right there. Just so that we know what our timing is again, because this timing at the end will still work fine. So the center is going to be there. He's not going to go up very far, but he's going to go to the right a bit more. And then we can duplicate our spring 4 frame, and we'll just put rolling 1 because this is where it starts rolling. Rolling 1. And there we go. He's going to touch down the ground here. And so the distance from here to here, he's going to go a little bit less that distance from there to the next frame. So for rolling 2, since our alpaca went from like here to here, he's going to go from here to about here. And then we're going to cut that distance in half for rolling 3. And now we can just hold down shift and move him to the right. See, now we got a little shaving of a pixel. You got that little thick line, that whole line's there. So for this frame, for rolling, this is rolling 3. So for rolling 4, I'm rolling 4, select your alpaca. We want half of, see this line here? Just want half of that to show, so you only see a little, like a couple pixels of that red under the onion skin. And then we're going to duplicate this again. And we're going to move this over 1 or 2 pixels. Like that. And we're going to select this frame that says last. And we're just going to delete that because we don't know. If we select this alpaca here, and he's not exactly on the ground plane where this one, if he's a pixel over or under, then people are going to notice. So unless you can get it exact, I think I did it. Unless you can get it exact, it's not going to look right. You want to move this over just 1 pixel. And then we're going to duplicate this last frame several times, so that way when it comes to the end of the animation, it'll pause for a bit and you can see it that way. Now this spare frame, the spare alpaca, we don't need them anymore. Now we want to go back our first frame, or this last frame, this frame that says last. This one got moved. Doesn't matter. We can delete it because we have a bunch of these and we can just duplicate these. Okay, close up the ones we're not going to need, which is all these ones that are open. And now, I saved a lot of those. You may need them. Don't beat yourself up if you don't get it right first time. It takes a little bit of learning to learn the timing, but the more you try it and the more you page through it, the more you'll be able to eyeball it and make sure it looks right. So I'm going to turn off the diagram for all these last ones that say last, because when we export our animation, we don't want that to show up. But we will need the diagram for a couple of these. So, all right, I'm just going to do this. Okay, so let's go back and do the frames we didn't do. So we have our first frame and we have our stretch 1 frame, and we missed these 2 ticks. So we want to do those 2 ticks. We only need 1 frame of stretch. We don't need to ease into that stretch. We only need to do it once. So let's duplicate our first frame. Now let's take the alpaca that's there and move it. Move it about here. And then we'll duplicate this frame again. Alright, so we'll take our alpaca again, move it about here. Now since I put that there, it looks like okay, so we see this stretch frame here. That's not going to work. These and these are too close. So we'll move this. Let's tweak it a little bit by moving it forward and down. And we want to make sure it still looks right when we go back and play it back. We'll move this alpaca back. Make sure we're kind of sticking to an arc. And we'll take this alpaca here, move him back a little more, get this first alpaca here, and take him a little bit further off the screen. You still want to be able to see him. And as we're going, and we think we look about right, click this button here to turn the layer off. And then we can page through and see how it looks. From here to here, it looks like a little bit of a straight line. So I'm going to take this alpaca and kind of bow him out a little bit. So this looks a little bit less like a straight line now. And maybe bow this one out a little bit too, because it looks like it went straight from here to here. So we're going to go back to this, to here, moving forward a little bit. Take our alpaca and then take our stretchy alpaca here, move him forward a little, maybe move him a little bit down, forward. That looks about right. And since he's moving at a different angle now, you want to Control T, hover off the screen and click to rotate. So he's going like this. Boo, whip. Okay, cool. Now we're back to our spring pose. And if we look at our diagram that we left on for our spring, we have 2 more frames that need to be done. So we can duplicate this. And since we're done with this, we can turn that off. And we got this alpaca here. Move him here. These ones are probably going to be just about right. And then we can duplicate this spring and put the alpaca here. And move him a little bit down so there's more, looks more like an arc. It doesn't have to be exactly symmetrical. If you make it a little bit less symmetrical, then you actually get a more appealing motion. Let's turn off these layers so that way they're not in the way when we try to look at it in autoplay mode. And page through, boom, boom. So, and close these folders to make it easier on yourself when you're animating. Go here, turn that off. Your spring 2. You want to duplicate this. And then we have 3 frames where these in the air here, so we just need to put in the X. We have the 1, the 2, and do the 3rd. So take him, move him about here, and since we're looking at this, they look too close together here, so I'm going to space these out a little bit more. It's all about eyeballing it. You want it to look good. And where's spring 2 here? I'm going to spring back up quite so fast this time either. So that's going to look a little bit better. And if we take this off, again, you don't want to necessarily follow what I'm doing. You want to follow what you're doing, and page through your animation to see if it looks good. Try pushing the page forward and page backward buttons at an even pace, and you can kind of get a feel for it. And if you need, you can always open up autoplay and see how it looks from there. So this is what we got so far. See, that looks pretty good. So you just want to go through and make sure all of your guide layers are turned off, so that way they don't show up when you export. Okay, so if we play this through, all of our guide layers should be gone, We'll be able to see what the ball bounce looks like. There we go. It takes a while for it to load your whole animation. See, that looks all right. I would put a little bit more easing, have it roll for a little bit longer before it comes to a stop. Let's just fix that right now. Alright, and there we go. So here's what we have now. And that looks a little bit more realistic. That makes it look so much better. It took a little bit extra tweaking, but again, that's going to make or break your animation. Alright, so that's our bow bounce from left to right. I don't know if I'll have time today to go through and do a bowling ball bounce. What I'll do, instead of showing you step by step how to do it, is I will just do it on my own. I'll show you the diagram I used, and I'll show you what it looks like when you page through it, and then I'll show you what it looks like when you autoplay it. Alright, so I'm back, and I finished the heavy ball bounce, and there's what my diagram looks like here. As you can see, this first arc is very big and very fast. It only takes 2 frames to come down. The fact that it's falling from so high so fast informs you that it's heavy. And also because it came so high but only bounced about that high, that shows, okay, well, it's losing a lot more. It's a lot more attracted to the ground than it is to the air. And this is what it looks like when you page through it. It's following that outline very closely. I drew this line with my Cintiq pen. As you can see, it looks a lot nicer than when you draw it with the mouse. But even though we drew with the mouse last time, we still got a pretty good looking ball bounce. And so here's what it looks like in autoplay. I apologize. I'm not going to bother removing the outline. Look at that. Now, you want to make sure that when you're animating something heavy, it gets really, really slow in the beginning, and it gets really, really fast, and it takes a while to finally settle down. Whereas a faster ball, you can have that ease in about 2 or 3 frames. With this one, I put about 6 frames just for this, just when it goes from here to like 1 pixel over. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to export. So we're going to go back to our little alpaca bounce. And all you want to do is you want to go File, Export Layers. This Export Layers option is only on when you have onion skin mode on. So if you're animating, you probably already have it on, and that will work fine. So go to File, hit Export Layers, and you want to go to your desktop or wherever, and you want to Control-Shift-N to create a new folder, and then you're going to put your alpaca bounce, and you're going to save it in your alpaca bounce folder. So double click here, then put select folder, and it's going to, as you can see, it's waiting, and while it waits, alright, so it saved all your layers into that folder. It says open Alpaca, the animated GIF convert service. You can use Alpaca, but whenever you create a GIF through Alpaca, it has a little FireAlpaca logo on it, so we don't want to do that. You want to open up your browser, and I like to use gifmaker.me, and you don't have to deal with any watermark when you use gifmaker.me. So you go to upload images, you go to wherever your folder is. Alright, so when you're in your folder, you want to select your first one, you want to hold down the shift key, and you click on your last one, and that will open them all. And then it'll upload all your images to gifmaker.me, and then once it's done uploading, it'll show you a preview here. The larger your resolution, the longer it's going to take to upload these, and since we're working in 1600 by 900, that's a pretty big resolution. You normally would want to export that at a lower resolution, but for today's purposes it doesn't matter. When you actually export the GIF, you can save some time by changing this percentage bar here. So if we wanted it to be half the size, or if we want it to be a quarter of the size, you just put 25% the size. That's a 400 by 200 GIF. That's going to look great. Milliseconds. How many milliseconds do you want? We want to export at about 12 frames per second. And here it shows you 12 frames per second is about 83 milliseconds. So we go back here, we type in 83. It's not going to be able to export exactly 83, but it's going to look great. And then you just hit create GIF animation. So let's just hit this create GIF animation, and it says we can view the diff or download the GIF. We can view it just so we know exactly how it's going to be. And there you go. Looks like that. Very cute. And you can just save this by right-clicking, hit save image as, and right. And I'll save it in here, and we can see what it looks like. Alright, so that's what our GIF looks like. Isn't it pretty? So I hope you all enjoyed today's lesson. Again, there's a lot more things we still need to go through. The next thing I'd like to teach you guys is a walk cycle. So get ready for that. We're just going to do something simple, something like the ball walk that I showed in the last one, but we're going to put in arms. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to show you how to do a walk cycle using nothing but your keyboard and mouse and FireAlpaca. Again, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like, leave a comment, share. And if you did do this tutorial and you have yourself a cute little FireAlpaca GIF, go ahead and tweet me at penciljuice, and I would love to give you some pointers and tell you how I think of your animation skills. Alright, well, y'all have a good one.